And actually, I should start out and say I'm actually here on some false pretenses. Whatever resume you've read about me or anything like that, if you go all the way through it, you will never find business reporter, financial reporter, any of those kinds of things. That's not something I did in my career at the Miami Herald, and certainly haven't done a lot in talking here at the Cronkite School over the last 20 years. So to some degree, much of my expertise on economic stuff came from Sunday watching The Big Short. Which if you haven't seen yet, I recommend highly. It's great. In fact, I went home and immediately downloaded the book that it was based on, and I'm 3/4 of the way through that already. So great book. I still don't understand how it all fell apart, but it's a great movie. So let me get my slides loaded here, and we will get started. Okay, I got asked to talk about where to find economic data. And as I say, my particular background and expertise is not in working with economic data. So I treated this assignment basically the same way I always did as a general reporter and investigative reporter for the Miami Herald. Come in the morning knowing nothing about a particular subject, and by the end of the day having enough expertise to be able to talk to people or write a story or whatever. So I treated it as kind of a reporting assignment. In reality, some of the things that I'm going to show you here, I actually do know a lot about, that I have worked with for a variety of other reasons, not necessarily, come on in, not necessarily, purely economic kinds of stories, but often demographic and investigative and so on. So I do have actually some expertise. This actually could be a very short talk because here's really the answer on where to find economic data. It's everywhere. It's all over the place. If you're a Calvin and Hobbes fan, you'll recognize that cover. But there really is treasure everywhere. It didn't take much work on my part to sit down on my computer, start thinking about, okay, where would I find data that would let me tackle economic stories of some kind or other. So what I'm going to try and do here is take you through ones that I know about and have worked with for a variety of reasons. Some others that I came across and say, boy, I bet that looks interesting, and if I ever had to do a good economic story, that would be a place I would go. But I can't claim a lot of expertise in those. Depending on how much time we have, we'll take a look. We'll open up some of these. Most of these slides are screenshots of the places. We also will have a handout for you that lists all the URLs that I'm going to show you, so you don't have to madly write them down. Let's see here. So, here's basically what we're going to talk about in the next hour here. If I can get myself organized properly. Okay. So again, there's treasure everywhere. One of the most treasure-filled places is actually the census. Everybody thinks of the census as this, agency that every 10 years wakes up, runs around, counts a bunch of heads, and then kind of goes back to sleep. And that's absolutely not the case with the Census Bureau. Census Bureau is actually the primary gatherer of information about the U.S., not only its people, but its economy. Huge amounts of information are gathered using a whole variety of methods, very often big surveys. They are constantly in the field gathering information of a whole variety of things. And I'll mention a number of those and kind of show you at least where to find those. So this anyway is the main splash page. Obviously the way to find it, just Google census and it'll pop up right on the top. You can see up on the top a whole variety of things, topics and geography and stuff like that. What you want in terms of talking about economic data is the business and industry portion of it. If you go under topics and go to economy, it'll open up into this, and this actually is a portal into all kinds of different things that the Census Bureau gathers. And I'll talk a little bit about some of those. For instance, the economic census, just like the census that goes around and counts people and asks questions about their background and demographics and things like that. There's an economic census that is done every 5 years, and what it requires of businesses above a certain size, and actually pretty small size, is a form gets sent to them all, and they have to answer a bunch of questions about number of employees and their total business volume, and what they make or sell, what they do, and so on. This is all gathered, as I say, every 5 years, and then dribbles out. So the most recent is the 2012 economic census, and that information is actually still flowing out, though I think we're pretty near the end of that flow cycle. The nice thing about the economic census is you can go down to very local level kind of thing. I mean, you can't go to the block level because, again, just like with the population census, the information is anonymous. You can't go and look at the census return for the company that you're trying to write about. But you can get summary data that will describe basically the economy of your area, the different balances of it, and so on. So the economic census is a wonderful source of information about the economy, whether you're looking at the nation or you're trying to take it down to your own local level. Other important things that the Census Bureau gathers are the economic indicators. You see those buried in in kind of weekly reports that show up in the fine print of stories when they're talking about how the economy is going. Factory orders and all these other kinds of phrases that you'll hear. Those come out of the economic indicators portion of what the Census Bureau gathers. And so again, you can get on basically get on a mailing list from Census to get these things sent to you regularly. So anyway, a whole variety of things there. We'll take a look at the site and dig a little deeper in a minute after I flip through these slides here. Another thing worth looking at is American FactFinder. This is the portal for the data gathered, and it's actually this rolling annual survey that the Census Bureau does, and it's taken over what used to be the every 10 years so-called long form, the one that asked all those the more interesting, frankly, questions than the very simple straightforward head count questions. That got very expensive, doing the long form every 10 years, and the problem with it was it was like watching a movie where you could only see every 10th frame, where things would be sort of jumpy. You wouldn't know what was going on if you, for instance, had a huge recession in the middle of a 10-year census period. So what American FactFinder does is gives up a little bit of small area resolution, because it's basically a survey. It's a survey of a couple million people a year, but it creates a rolling picture of what's going on. A lot of the questions are, again, it's aimed at individuals and households. So a lot of the questions are, about, people's background and their, sort of basic demographic kinds of questions: age, race, gender, education levels, those kinds of things. That may or may not be relevant to economic stories that you're doing. But there are a bunch of questions about work, where people work, what they do, the industry they work in, the type of job they have in that industry, the hours or weeks that they've worked, their commuting patterns, all these kinds of things that go into economic stories. So if you want good detailed information about how the people you are writing for, what their activity, I guess, in the economy is, American FactFinder is a great place to go. The site is a little tricky to learn how to do it. There was incredible whining, of course, from reporters who were used to the old way. It was like, oh no, it's changed. We hate change as reporters. We're more conservative than anybody. But it can work well. While I'm thinking of it, let me recommend to you, if you go on the Cronkite School site, somewhere under Outreach, and if somebody reminds me at the end of this, I'll show you on the site where to find it. We actually have I guess it was a couple of years ago, got a grant to bring in a bunch of people from Census and a bunch of reporters who had particular expertise in different parts of census economic kinds of data. And so on that site are a bunch of videos of sort of hour-long presentations of either experts, either reporter experts or actual subject area experts from the census, including somebody who talks about how to use American FactFinder well. So I recommend that as a great way to learn some things. So anyway, census is just an incredible way of getting all kinds of information. I don't have a particular slide on it here, but import-export data. The Census Bureau is the repository for all information about stuff we make and send overseas and the stuff we buy from overseas and bring in. And so that is kept in incredible detail, and it is now, you can access it now much easier. There actually used to be a paid portal for getting it because, at least in the past, the only people interested in that kind of thing were businesses who were actually willing to pay for information. Who would have thought? It's not like newsrooms, of course. But now that portal has actually been made free, so you can get at that there too. So if you look in the international trade section of the census site, you can find great information there.
Is that the same as trade.gov?
No, that's a different thing. But a lot of these sites, like trade.gov and so on, will actually have links to each other. There's a lot of interlinking of these things. I could find, when we go to the website, I'll find it there for you and show you. There's like a label, it's like Trade Online or USA Trade Online or something like that. But we'll find it.
How granular does that get in terms of geography?
Pretty granular. Again, I'm aware of it. I haven't done a story with it, so I'm not deep enough to tell you. You can take it right down to the east side of Phoenix, right? But my understanding is, in fact, you can take it down to at least metro areas. So what's coming out and what's going in your area, plus all the different sort of ports all the way around the country and what they're bringing in and so on. So it's great material if this is an area that you want to explore. Another one to look at, Commerce Department. And actually, the Census Bureau is sort of part of the Commerce Department. Commerce Department has a whole bunch of other activities that it handles. Bureau of Economic Analysis, I'll throw in a couple slides of that here in a second. They are the ones who basically put out the key economic indicators that I mentioned a minute ago, even though those essentially are gathered by the census data gathering operation. Commerce has NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. Is that an economic thing? Absolutely. You're going to be writing stories, I'm sure, this year about how El Nino is affecting economy, or when you have big snowstorms in the east, you can actually measure the impact of that kind of thing. So a whole variety of commerce kind of activities. Here, in fact, are the collection of links that the commerce and boy, couldn't be any less bright, could it? Anyway, sorry about that. Well, you can see it on their site, and you'll see the things. Not only Census and Bureau of Economic Analysis, BLS, Bureau of Labor. Is that one on there? No, BIS. That's a different one. So a whole variety of different things. Even the Patent and Trademark Office, which you can now look at and search and so on. Bureau of Economic Analysis. This is again another source of very detailed information about how the economy is working, and it does go down to pretty granular levels. At least gets down to the right. It'll get to regional, state level, at least of those kinds of things. Plus, it'll go by industry as well. You can look at industry level data. One thing I should mention, anytime you go to one of these sites, again, and this whole theme of this talk is finding economic data. And the first thing I always look for, because I'm a data hound, is some link on whatever page I'm looking at. It'll say something like data or statistics or whatever. May say, data portal, and there are a whole variety of things, often buried, might be under research or whatever. And if you dig around on there, click on there, very often it will open up into their collection of data stuff. I should mention that when I got started doing this kind of work when I was at the Miami Herald, going back to the 1980s, back then, of course, all this kind of information had to be done through public record requests. Very often you got it on paper, required retyping in. It was a huge pain back in ancient times doing this kind of thing. The Census Bureau was among the very first agencies certainly in the federal government and in any government level, to get the concept of taking data and putting it on the web and making it available. I once did a big project using decennial population data for the Miami Herald. National data required spending thousands of dollars to buy, big 9-track computer tapes and process them and all that kind of thing to be able to do that project. Within a couple of years, the Census Bureau had essentially stopped doing all that kind of thing and no longer sold those tapes. It just basically put all that same information on the web to be downloaded. So they got it early, and they really go out of their way to make it easy to get stuff. And that has spread across government pretty well. You mentioned the data.gov. There's another one called Spendinggov. These are portals that are created to put various kinds of databases on up and available for people to find and use. So BEA, here's the data portal for BEA, which is called Interactive Data. Some sites, like the BEA one, allow you to set various kinds of parameters where the website itself will do a certain amount of analysis for you. It'll filter, it'll pull out only the stuff you're interested in. Others are, pretty much bulk download. You have to download everything from the nation and then use your software. I'll talk a little bit about tools at the end of this. Use software to pull out the stuff you're really interested in to do your comparisons. But BEA does have a certain amount of interactivity allowed there. Other places to find information. Federal Reserve. This certainly has been in the hot seat certainly ever since the recession. Their recent move to start actually jacking up interest rates is, obviously was big news. And they have tons and tons of data about the economy that they basically use to make these kinds of decisions. Here's their research and data page. That's on here, and again, you're seeing just a kind of a quick look. Many of these, by the way, these screenshots are there. Many of these things go way down. There's all kinds of other stuff that is on there. Again, we'll take a look at, flip through at least some of these here shortly. So the Federal Reserve. There are a couple of the regional Federal Reserves. The one in Philadelphia actually produces regular. Any of you guys from that region of the Federal Reserve? Yeah. Do you get the regional Federal Reserve kind of newsletter where they're doing analyses about their stuff? It's and they reach out very well. I think that's worth looking at. The SEC, of course, Securities and Exchange Commission. The people who supposedly are the traffic cops for how things are sold. Of course, if you have just finished watching The Big Short, you no longer are very impressed with what they did. But anyway, but on the other hand, we shouldn't be impressed with ourselves either, because among the scenes are the reporter who's sort of blowing off the guys who were saying, the whole thing's going to collapse, and probably not. Well, there's a missed story there. Okay, so the SEC has, is the place where all publicly owned companies are supposed to be filing their information. I'm sure you know of EDGAR, which is the the portal for getting information about any of those companies. My dream as a data journalist, investigative reporter, would be to find ways to mass download information out of something like EDGAR, use the appropriate software to somehow be able to read through masses of these filings, 10Ks or whatever, and have the software flag the things like whether you have a bubble appearing or whether you have accounting standards that are being ignored or things like that. As near as I can tell, again, without being a true expert in this, but having read some interesting stuff by other investigative reporters who are working on the problem, we're not there yet. The kind of natural language processing ability is coming along, but it's still not quite there to be able to make a computer do the incredibly tedious task of reading through all those things and flagging the bits that are suspicious. One of the points, again, I keep bringing up The Big Short because it's front of mind. One of the interesting tales in there was the guy in California who was basically an Asperger guy who he found all this stuff by basically reading thousands and thousands of prospectuses himself, which nobody apparently did. They would just take these things and collateralize them and sell them and so on. And he actually sat down and spent weeks and months digging through, reading all these things, making notes and so on. What a concept. Okay, so the SEC and EDGAR is the way into finding out things about the companies you're interested in. The people who work for those companies are being sort of watched by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. BLS is gathers sort of the things that we want to know about employment and unemployment, union activity, all those kinds of things are all in there. They have lots of data. It does go down to goes down to local levels. Here's it's just sort of the top of a screen of a bunch of things about the Phoenix area that I just found by clicking in. One of the best data journalists that I know, Sarah Cohen of the New York Times, who's gotten a couple of Pulitzers from her time working at the Washington Post, and now is the data editor at the New York Times, she's actually a product of BLS. She got started as after she got out of college, she went and worked for the BLS for a couple of years, was so incredibly bored that she said to hell with it and went off and got I think she went to North Carolina and got a journalism master's and went on from there. But that background, that ability to look at information, to analyze data, find the patterns in it, and so on, is the key characteristic of a good data journalist, which Sarah certainly is. Time to throw in a commercial for sort of my half of the world, the one that I am actually really familiar with, the investigative side, investigative reporters and editors, IRorg. I strongly recommend, no matter what your reporting interest is, or if you're teaching, to persuade your students to get involved with this. IRE has a great collection of data itself. One of the things it does through NICAR, its National Institute of Computer Assisted Reporting, is gather federal data and have it in a format that is easy for reporters to get their hands on. Lots of it deals with a whole variety of things that certainly aren't necessarily economic. You can get crime data and bridge inspection data and dams and all those kinds of things. But they also have a lot of economic data as well. And this is available for modest prices, basically depending on the size of your news organization. For those of you who are professors, you're treated as the smallest of news organizations. So often for $25 or $50, you can get your hands on a big pile of data. Here's just a couple of the things that the IRE data archive regularly gets in and updates as it gets new things from the feds. And all of these have been used by reporters for a whole variety of different kinds of stories. I should add that in my data journalism class, I haven't used a textbook. I've instead just made my students join IRE for $25. That's the student price of being IRE. And with that, you get access not only to all this kind of data, which I acquire for my students if needed, but to a whole variety of other things. For instance, tip sheets. One of the great things in the IRE archive are well over 2,000 tip sheets that have been created by reporters who have done stories on whatever it is that you might be interested in. So you can go on the, if you're an IRE member, for those of us who are not students, I think it's, what is it these days, $65 a year, maybe 75. You can search and see whether somebody has actually already done the story that you want to do. Let's see, HMDA, the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act. If you're interested in how mortgage loans are being done in your area, you can not only get the data from IRE, but you can do a search for HMDA and you'll find great tip sheets from people who've done stories in their area on this, about the people they talk to, the things to watch out for, all that kind of stuff. It's just great. It's great material. Oops. Okay. Here is that spending.gov site, usaspending.gov. It's actually this morning it wasn't even working. I kept trying and it was just spinning, so I'm not even sure I'll be able to show you that. My difficulty with it is it's sort of a hodgepodge. It's like, I'm pretty sure it came out of a order from the White House that, hey, we need to open up data. So everybody and all the various agencies ran around and said, okay, what do we have that looks vaguely like data? Let's all shovel it into this site. So they claim thousands of spreadsheets in it. There is a search tool for it, but it's, I guess I would call it a themeless kind of archive. You may find interesting things in there for you. It's certainly a place worth looking at to see if it has the information that you're after. But it in itself basically is kind of a dumping ground for all those kinds of things. This thing was from the Department of Labor. I remember I mentioned Bureau of Labor Statistics. The larger Department of Labor is the one that deals with all kinds of violations of labor laws and so on, OSHA, that kind of thing. And you can find their databases on things like OSHA violations, and again, I apologize for these slides that are pretty difficult to read there, but we'll take a look at this one in a minute and see what we can find on it. But again, this is an example of you going to the main site, find data, click on that, and it'll open up into something like this. Another group that deals with data that would be of interest to reporters who deal with the economy is the Office of Management and Budget. It's the White House agency that helps craft the national budget and also points out problems with how our money is being spent and so on. What I've mentioned so far, other than NICAR, has mostly been government-related economic agencies, but there also are a variety of sort of private think tank kinds of organizations as well. The think tanks, of course, will take various different political stances. But you have things like the National Bureau of Economic Research that that produces working papers and picks particular subjects. Another example of that is this American Institute for Economic Research. If you Google economic research, you'll find these and other kinds of things like this. Another place, I don't have a slide on it, but another good place to find economic research is Google Scholar, which obviously is indexing economic research papers being done by academics of various kinds. I'm always fascinated by the stories I read from reporters who've been smart enough to find, some guy at Yale or whatever who's done some deep, incredible analysis of the stock price patterns of something over the years and has found some interesting anomaly, and they very often produce interesting stories. I remember a Wall Street Journal analysis they had done several years ago that looked at the option prices that were being given to top executives of various companies. And the way an option is supposed to work is that an option is given to be able to buy at a certain price, and of course the idea for the option is to give the executive an incentive to make sure that the price rises after the option point, so that they can actually make a lot of money by being able to buy at the cheaper, lower price. What the Wall Street Journal discovered, however, was an astonishing coincidence that many of the options were actually being dated for the day that the stock price was at its lowest, whenever it was. In other words, the boards were backdating these options to be able to give their executives a bigger boost than they otherwise might have an incentive to do. And they were able to show it not only was happening in a bunch of different companies, but they actually calculate the chances that just by chance that option happened to be given on that particular day that happened to be the low point and so on. Well, clearly it was essentially being backdated. Another place to look for interesting information about your area are your state economic research agencies of various kinds. This is Bieber, which I happen to know from my days in Florida, the Bureau of Economic and Business Research. And it was very good. It basically was the agency that measured the Florida economy to help not only business, but also legislators and so on make hopefully reasonably wise decisions about how the impact of their decisions would go. So look for those kinds of things in whatever agency that you're, or whatever state or local area that you're looking at. So anyway, that's a fast look at some of these kind of places. Let me mention some tools quickly for you, basically ways to play with this stuff. One of the difficulties, if you're not familiar with some of these kinds of tools, when you start talking about data, is very often it's a big pile of it. Okay, it's not like you get a handy white paper that explains to you everything that's in there. The really interesting stuff is things that you will get to find. The patterns that you'll find. And what we're often looking for, we journalists are looking for, is outliers. We are interested in the extremes, not the middle so much. We want to see who's the most and who's the least, and the best and the worst, and that kind of thing. So you need ways to find that kind of thing, which I'll mention in a little detail here in a second. One, I guess, way of thinking about this kind of work that I always took into doing data projects that I was interested in, whether it was the aftermath of the hurricane or the criminal justice system in South Florida, and, those kinds of things, is basically to work backwards. I would actually start by imagining the lead and the bullet points, basically, of the story that I wanted to do. I wouldn't know the exact parameters to put in that lead, but it might be something like, recent bad weather has caused a X amount of change in the local economy, something like that. Okay, that's the story I want to do. I don't know what X is at this point, but I'm starting at the end. I'm really imagining that final product that I can do. And then I say, okay, what variables do I need to be able to create X? And so then I start listing those kinds of things. What things would I need to have measured in order to be able to create the, start filling in the blanks and putting up the bullets that I have. And then I say, okay, now I know the variables that I need. Who would collect these variables? And that's when I start doing, again, the same kind of research. Who is it that is responsible for measuring these kinds of things? Are all of these available? Maybe not. There's lots of things that I would love to have gathered that, for whatever reason, no agency has been charged with actually gathering it. So sometimes you have to make amends on that. So by starting at the end and stepping back, find the agency, then okay, who you have to make a public records request of, or which websites you need to dig around in to find, or which subject area expert from that agency should you try and track down to get them to tell you what you need. I would say get to know the public affairs offices of the agencies that you're interested in. Census actually happens to be really good. They're very helpful. We'll always try and hook you up directly with the person who actually not only knows the data but loves it. That's the other thing about these people who are really into it. I mean, they're delighted when they actually get somebody who's interested in the same thing they are. And you'll actually see some of that if you go to that Cronkite site that I mentioned that has the collection of videos on all this. You'll be hearing from people who really love these numbers. They want to spread the love, so go for that. Okay, so working backwards is a way to think. Your prime tool for at least starting with this is a spreadsheet. These days you don't have to be able to write Excel macros and do other heavy lifting, but every reporter ought to know the basics of working with Excel, because it is actually the perfect kind of plastic tool that can be applied to any kind of data. Anything that you work with, again, what we are interested in is extremes. And very often we get information that is in the least interesting order possible, alphabetical. All alphabetical is good for is finding a particular thing in a long list of stuff. But with Excel, you can suck it in there. Let's say it's economic data for all the different metros in the country, and what you're trying to do is put your metro into that context. You can pull it in there, you can hit a button, sort it, and all of a sudden you see where you are in that long list of stuff. Yes?
How do you check your work with Excel? Because I know, even if you know well, there's so many little things that could go wrong. It could get mismatched, and how do you do fact checking after you?
Right. Yeah, one of the things about Excel is, in the old days with pocket calculators, when you're working on your My Little Pony calculator or whatever, it took a whole bunch of keystrokes to make a mistake. Now you can make literally millions of mistakes with one keystroke. Just put in the wrong formula and it'll, the Excel will say, that's what you want? Okay, I'm going to do it. So you're right. The way to deal with that is be skeptical of your own work as well. Look at it and say, does this make sense? I don't have a good economic example, but I remember an occasion in South Florida where happily another newspaper had done a full-page thing of school test scores. The new school test scores had come out, and so they took last year's test scores in the spreadsheet and this year's test scores, and then calculated the point difference and the percentage change of all those, ran this long full-page list of all these sorted that way. And the morning it ran, they got calls from half the principals in the district. who are all saying, "Oh, you made our scores way too, our change way wrong." The other half didn't call because we wound up making, well, not we, somebody else happily, we reporters made them look good. What had happened is the reporter had managed to put in, on deadline, they're working fast, that kind of thing, put in a formula that actually referred to the next row down without actually having gotten the right one. You click a button, it copies it down, quick, get it in the paper, it's deadline. And the part that wasn't done is the looking at it and saying, wait a minute, this says the best school in our area in terms of change is this one. Boy, that's strange. I wouldn't expect them. I would have expected, oh, wait, why are they way down there? That kind of thing. So basically, does this make sense is a way to find out. Looking again at your own formula, because I guess another point to make is the computer does what you tell it to do, not what you want it to do. Okay, so be real careful on that. Yeah?
How would you learn Excel? I don't think I've ever used it in my life.
How, what?
How would you learn Excel?
I can teach it to you in an hour. There's only a handful of things that that you need to know how to do. You'll wind up expanding on it. Sorting is easy. Once you put something into Excel, there's a button. Click on the button, tell it which column you want to sort by, and it'll do that. So that you can learn that in 2 minutes. Filtering is another thing. You click on the filter button, tell it you only want to see whatever it is. You only want to see results from your state if you have a state column, and all of a sudden it'll narrow it down to that. A good place to learn about Excel, go to a NICAR conference, which will be this year, I think it's in New Orleans in February or March. I'd have to look and see. But there are sessions on basic Excel stuff there. And again, it's really the tool to learn. If you're not using Excel, get familiar with it. There are, right, and in fact, NICAR is, they're actually building a collection of actual explanations how to do various things like that. So it's coming. Keep an eye, there's more of that kind of stuff available. And there are other places as well. One thing, try to stick with a place that teaches journalists. There are lots of places that'll talk about how to do Excel, but they're very often aimed at business people. It'll use examples like how to set up an accounting system for a canoe company or something like that. That doesn't resonate with us. We want to take economic data or crime data or something like that. Yeah. Oh, she was next. Okay.
One thing, I went to one of IRE's watchdog workshops this
Yeah.
year, which are regional workshops, and they have great Excel training,
Yeah.
including how to use pivot tables, which is really helpful.
Pivot tables are magic, right? I agree.
My question for you is,
Yeah.
what do you like to use to scrape data when it's in a PDF and ugly format?
The best thing to use to scrape data is the nerd in your newsroom who knows how to do that kind of thing. You can ask online. I mean, there are scraping is going to maybe a website that doesn't have one of those data download buttons, and then basically telling the computer away, just keep reading it, copy the stuff, build the thing. There are a variety of tools for doing that, but you have to start learning scripting languages. Something like Python is good. I'm an anomaly because back in dinosaur ages, I learned how to use SAS, which is a high-end and expensive program that I still use because I get it here free, so I've never learned Python. But Python is good. There are good books on scraping. Paul Bradshaw wrote a very nice description of easy ways to get harder and harder. So give that a try. Yeah.
If you have actual Acrobat, not Reader,
Right.
you can save it in Excel.
Often.
Table.
Right.
Or you can save it as a table in Word, which is cut and paste into Excel.
Yeah.
But I use OmniPage.
That's a good one too.
It's
Yeah.
worth it. I probably use it 15, 20 times a week.
Yeah.
Because it takes any image and converts it to plain text and tables and spreadsheets.
It depends on the PDF. You're right. If you get a PDF, a lot of PDFs are created by either Word or let's say even Excel. With Excel, you can have a data table, and one of the save as choices is PDF. It always aggravates me when a government agency gives me the PDF of the Excel thing, because if they just gave you the Excel thing, you wouldn't have to go through that.
The advantage of the Omni page is a lot of people will do the PDF as essentially a JPEG.
Right, which
And
is
Omni page will convert the JPEG.
with 92% accuracy.
I don't know, newest version, I'm running 98, 99%.
Yeah, well, the trouble with 98 or 99, you're basically gonna have to go through and check it all, which is fine if you've got 5 pages. If you're working with 500 pages, it gets to be a challenge. I once ran into a spreadsheet, it was actually given by our governor's office a few years ago, where they had deliberately gone to a PDF that was an image, but it was also a very strange font. Somehow or other, it required an incredible amount of scripting that I didn't know how to do to actually be able to get the information off of it. I mean, they've deliberately done it basically to try and keep us from using it. It was the list of all the people who had sent money to Arizona to build a fence along the border, that kind of thing, which they were very proud of the total, but they didn't actually want to talk about where all the money was coming from. So anyway, yes, there are tools like that to do it. I mean, obviously we don't have time here to talk about all those. IRE, NICAR, the watchdog workshops are great places to learn those. You know, in a 1-hour basic Excel session, believe me, you can get up to good speed with it. Okay, I already mentioned, look for the data download buttons or links or whatever on sites. That's the way you find it. Excel will open all kinds of things. It will open data that's in Excel format, but you don't even have to have it in that. It can be text, comma-separated values, or a whole variety of different things. If the PDF that you're working with was, say, created by Excel, then something like Acrobat, absolutely, you can just tell it to basically unpack it back into an Excel thing, and that's good to work with. Okay, you guys have been good already about asking questions. That's good. But if you have any more, throw them out here. I do want to take you through. What did I do? Here we go. Let's just take a look at some of our. Yeah.
On the economic census, how local can that economic census get so that, like, let's say I want to compare 2 parts of town, an older part of town with a newer part of town.
You ever watch The Simpsons? The beginning when Bart has to write stuff on the blackboard? One of my favorites is, "I will not expose the ignorance of the faculty." Kind of done that. Okay, I'm not positive. I have not had an occasion to dig that deep into it, but let's take a quick look. So here I am on the census site. I'm looking at topics. Here's economy. Oh, over here, economic census. Let's take a look at that. Detailed geographic. Well, let's see how detailed it is, and so on. But anyway, pardon? It'll go down to tract level? Okay.
So you could compare 2 different parts of town.
In some
Right.
things, it depends on what it is.
Yeah.
It depends on what it is.
Some things it goes down to MSA.
I mean, I think
Yeah.
unemployment, you can get pretty detailed.
Yeah. And there are other tools, like for instance on unemployment, there's things from the BEA, some others that kind of triangulate around it. So, I mean, again, the downside of the economic census as a way to measure, say, current unemployment is it's only done every 5 years, and the stuff that is coming out now was essentially gathered back in 2012 when conditions were somewhat different. As on the other hand, as a way of sort of seeing how your economy is changing. What is the mix of, let's say, service to manufacturing to healthcare sectors and things like that? Using something like the economic census would be great, because you can go back through previous collections of this and see it happening. Yeah.
Another great area of especially breaking down regional data is your Metropolitan Planning Organization or Association of Governments.
Very good idea.
Because
Right.
they're the census data keepers for your region.
Absolutely right. In fact, they're very often the ones who decide where census, here's census tracts that need to be cut because there's been growth and so on. So, but they also are the gatherers of all that. In a way, it's like going to your local police stations to gather information about, FBI uniform crime statistics. The FBI gathers all that stuff at the end, but it's basically coming from that local level, and it's the same thing.
Metropolitan planning organizations, or some states it's an association of governments, some it's a
Right.
council of governments.
Yeah.
It's gonna vary from state to state.
Yeah, they have different names, but the whole idea is bring together all the little local. Yeah.
Every metropolitan area has a metropolitan planning organization somewhere.
Okay. So anyway, here I'm looking at the economic census thing, but let's look again quickly at some of the other economic programs. And just to give you an idea that there's plenty there, here's a scroll of other census data stuff. So all these kinds of things. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Residential construction. There's other kinds of censuses, censi, I guess, censi, whatever it is, that the Census Bureau gathers. There's a census of housing, for instance, that goes, that's regional. You can look at the change in your housing stock and what's being done. Survey of business owners. That's another every 5-year kind of thing. Lots of different sort of small things. Building permits. Any story that you've seen saying, building is taken back off again. It's basically coming out of that gathering of information by the Census Bureau. So I guess my recommendation, again, as one who hasn't actually done a lot of these stories myself, would be to dive in there. Once you know it exists, that has always been the thing with me. Once I'm aware that a particular kind of data exists, very often it triggers ideas for stories. Once you know something is there, then all of a sudden the light bulb will go on. My best example for that, and it's not economic, was in Miami. Somebody told me there was a database of all the pet licenses in Miami. And all of a sudden, wow, there's a story. I got that database and did the thing on, most popular breeds of dogs, names of dogs, all that kind of stuff could be done. And the whole idea came from somebody telling me that some kind of data actually existed. So tackle that. Let's see, what else do we have in here? That was those. Here's that American FactFinder site. In fact, while I'm thinking of it, let me show you the place to find under outreach. Where is the rest of the Oh, here we go. Outreach. Have they taken it off? I can't believe that. I'll find it for you. Oh, wait a minute. Professional programs. The trouble is, we just launched a new website like 2 days ago. And of course, being a journalist, I hate change. So, real world experience? Nope. Free. Okay, I didn't lie. It's in there someplace. We'll find it. And oh, wait a minute. Here it is. For no apparent reason. McCormick Census Training. You click on that, and each of these is a different thing. Other thing. In fact, here's Ron Campbell talking exactly about how to use American FactFinder. CPS, Current Population Survey. There's a rolling monthly survey that has, in fact, that's where our unemployment numbers each month come from, the CPS, along with a whole bunch of other things about income and so on that people are asked about. SIPP is Survey of Income and Program Participation, which basically looks at kind of the welfare side of it all. That's how they measure how many people are getting government assistance of various kinds. Survey of Jails, that was fun. This, health, let's see, a couple others. There's Sarah Cohen. Talking about economic census and county business patterns. This is another good one for looking in detail at how your economy is built and how it has changed over time. Okay. This thing that Paul Overberg, who I think now is with the Wall Street Journal, did on the local employment dynamics data. This is something that actually measures down to very small levels where the workers are coming from, where basically you see this flow of workers into your metropolitan area. If you look at the LEDD stuff, see Paul's video to see that. And again, a whole variety of other things in there. So this is a real good thing for you to look at. Let's see, what else do I want to show you here? That's the commerce map. We'll look at that. Okay, here's that list of things that the Commerce Data Hub has, including NOAA and several other things that I didn't even know existed, frankly.
Just on this one, because I teach some of this stuff.
Oh, good.
On the left-hand side of the BEA,
Yeah.
on the main BEA.
Oh, go to the BEA page? Yeah.
On the left-hand side, all those things on the left-hand side are very useful, and there's some really easy maps. You can sort of break it down into, if you want to look at regions, and then you can hit the county, and it opens up into other data.
Yeah.
And it's that whole left-hand thing there is really very user-friendly.
And actually that left rail often on a lot of these sites is the place where you'll find that data link and so on. But you're right about this.
But even with information for media, under the media tab, at some point they have all kinds of interesting things.
Okay.
It's one at the top, information.
Papers by topic. Oh yeah, information for media. Here you go. Yeah, this is, this may have press releases, and you may not be that enchanted of the idea of just basically regurgitating press releases, but very often press releases are good ways to find the name of somebody or, the particular bureau within the agency that produced this data, where you can then phone into or talk to somebody there and go way beyond just what the press release is talking about. What's new? Again, all these agencies also have sort of email lists where you can be alerted to things that are coming up. BEA's, yeah.
It just sort of where it says BEA at a glance, where it says U.S. economy at a glance at the top.
Okay.
That I found helpful for just different presentations, and then you can keep digging into it.
Right.
And drilling down.
Great point. So anyway, plethora of stuff that you can find in there, but you need to do it. Yes?
Are you familiar with Stats America, their portal site that the Commerce Department has put together?
I'm aware of it. It's like that data, usadata.gov. In fact, a lot of the same stuff it's like every agency got told, create a portal, and so they all dump things in.
But to the earlier question, at Stats America, there's actually a tool there where you can build a census profile of a neighborhood or a county. And it's a pretty interesting tool. We use that as a class project.
Yeah. FactFinder will do that too, actually, is a good, some of the easy tables that they have, you can say put in a zip code, you'll get not only the demographic information about the people living there, but things like median income, number of people employed, that kind of stuff. So those handy kind of omni pages with all kinds of information are great ways of getting started in doing that kind of thing. Stats America, is that what it's called?
StatsAmerica.org.
Well, let's do it that way then.
You just go up there and then you can see the tool kits that they've already pre-built. StatsAmerica.org.
There it is. Okay. Yeah.
You can actually build
Your portal. Okay.
Yeah. So there's all those like ready tools where you can build a profile towns.
Here's your neighborhood profile. Yeah.
And it's built off the most recent data. So if you're looking at what's the latest available, it'll only pull the latest that they have available.
Okay. Great tip. Stats America. That's one I wasn't aware of, actually. I was sort of dimly aware it was out there, but
it's a little bizarre agency of the Commerce Department.
Yeah. Yeah, they're everywhere on things like that. Let's see, what else did I want to show you? Federal Reserve, SEC, well, you already know about that. Let's take a quick look at the IRE NICAR data library. You can see the long list of things that are in here. But again, things that either are directly economic, like consolidated federal funds report and so on, where contracts are being given and so on, but other things that have an economic impact of some kind, the transportation-related data, for instance, food inspection information, federal contracts, grants, IRS movements, and so on, and small business data as well. So anyway, a ton of this stuff that can be searched by topic and bought at reasonable prices. Yes?
So I used to cover food safety, and FDA had a great thing where you could, anytime, you could set alerts that would tell you if there was a new alert, they had a food alert out. But for one of these, is there any way to get an alert that something has either been published or changed, or do you just have to kind of weekly go through and have your list of I'm going to check my news out?
There certainly is software, maybe one of you guys know one of these things, that actually will check daily, even hourly, maybe even more often, a website to see whether it has changed from the last time it looked. I know of people, they posted things on, for instance, the NICRL site, that, for instance, are always looking to see whether new lawsuits have been filed. And so there's software that will automate that. Go look at it. How does it compare to what's before? If it's different, it'll alert you. I can't tell you the name of that particular thing, but maybe one of you guys can.
There's a tech startup in Seattle we were just talking about called Scoop, which is SQOOP, and they're a startup, so they're still kind of figuring it out, but they'll scrape all the SEC files and all the lawsuits and send you an email every time any one of the public companies you're filing gets anything filed against them, or if they file anything. I've been using it, it's been working pretty well.
What's the name of it?
Scoop, it's SQOOP for some reason. Because they all have to have fun and cute names.
Is it free?
It is free.
Great tip.
Yeah.
It's free so far. One of the,
It's free so far.
yeah,
It only started like a year ago,
Yeah.
so it might not be.
yeah, use them while you got them, basically. That's one of the difficulties with a lot of these wonderful web startups that very often have good tools for doing things like scraping, for instance. There are sites where you can just put the URL in and it'll scrape for you, but then often they wind up disappearing because they haven't found a way to actually pay for it.
Do you ever use FRED? The Federal Reserve, it's the Federal Reserve database.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. Research.stlouisfed.org, and that pulls up a lot of the Fed data just really easily and then all graphically.
Good point. I was aware that St. Louis was another region that actually had really good reports coming out, but I wasn't aware of FRED itself, so good, thank you. Let's see, what else did I want to show you here? We got to still have a couple of minutes. Here's Department of Labor stuff, penalties, enforcement, OSHA stuff, wage and hour actions, all those kinds of things. So if you are doing a story about, let's say OSHA violations in your area, that's obviously the place to go because you can put your data in context. I realize what I've done is just sort of fire hosed you with a bunch of places that have information. It's by no means exhaustive, and you guys approved it by bringing up other interesting things as well. But if you tackle your next project on the sort of work backwards approach of figuring out what it is you want, and then figuring out who would collect that kind of information, I think you'll be amazed and delighted to find how much stuff is in fact out there. Any last questions anybody have? Comments? Yeah.
Quick comment.
Yeah, please.
First, I want to put in a plug for my former employer, which is another good source, moodyseconomy.com.
Okay.
They do breakdowns of regional data, regional economic data all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty accessible, and they even have a site called freelunch.com, which just grabs a lot of this stuff and makes it easily browsable. But the other thing, when you're looking at this stuff, you find that you frequently have to make sure you understand how this data is being gathered. It's not, it's something that's it's not, biblical writ just because it's in an Excel spreadsheet.
Right.
There can be methodological issues, there can be, bias issues, sample
Yeah.
bias issues, all
Sure.
this stuff. So, just as a word of caution, before you sort of dive in and treat this stuff as holy writ,
Yeah.
make sure you know why it's there and what it's.
And you're absolutely right on that. In fact, I guess I would certainly apply the same kind of skepticism you would have as a reporter to whatever source of information you're getting off of one of these sites. What does the agency, as you say, how do they gather this information, and what sort of need for reliability do they have? Is their reputation going to be harmed if they're putting out bogus information?
Even just sort of common methodological things. I mean,
Yeah.
seasonal adjustments. It's sort of like, well, that's
It's magic,
a logical
right.
thing, but,
Yeah.
there are problems with seasonal adjustments
Sure.
when you have big recessions.
Right.
Because suddenly they can be thrown out of whack for the next 5 years.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and you owe it to your readers and viewers to be able to, at least make them aware of the fuzziness of your data. Actually, one of the things that aggravates me all the time is, kind of the monthly story about how the unemployment rate has changed. It's changed by, a 1/10 of a percentage point. It's going up, it's going down, it's going up. Well, we don't know. That's actually kind of within the margin of error of the way the data is gathered. It's not like they have measured every single person who's either working or not. They're doing it with a sample, and there's inherent fuzziness around a lot of those numbers. Same thing with like presidential popularity and so on. Yeah.
And always read footnotes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, don't want to confuse people with too much detail. So, but that's actually absolutely true. Here's freelunch.com. Yes.
One thing I'd say about the alerts, like the FDA ones too, but I can't remember what the portal is, but for all the government sites, there is one that you can go, and it's very granular, where you can pick whatever industries you're interested in. And I get a million emails every day about, some new report about agriculture or whatever that comes out. So if you like those by email, you can go through, it's like Census, it's BLS. I get, 3 or 4 things from BLS every day, every time they release any sort of new thing. But it includes, I'll have to look it up, but it's a lot of stuff that you can get at your fingertips. And I like it that it's broken down by industry, if you're interested in aerospace or manufacturing or whatever.
Anything else? It's time to go get rid of used coffee and get ready for your next session. So, thank you.